Nepal, officially the Federal Democratic Republic of Nepal, is a landlocked country in South Asia. It is mainly situated in the Himalayas, but also includes parts of the Indo-Gangetic Plain. It borders the Tibet Autonomous Region of China to the north, and India to the south, east, and west, while it is narrowly separated from Bangladesh by the Siliguri Corridor, and from Bhutan by the Indian state of Sikkim. Nepal has a diverse geography, including fertile plains, subalpine forested hills, and 8 of the world's 10 tallest mountains, including Mount Everest, the highest point on Earth. Kathmandu is the nation's capital and the largest city. Nepal is a multi-ethnic, multilingual, multi-religious, and multicultural state, with Nepali as the official language. The name Nepal is first recorded in texts from the Vedic period of the Indian subcontinent, the era in ancient Nepal when Hinduism was founded, the predominant religion of the country. In the middle of the first millennium BC, Gautama Buddha, the founder of Buddhism, was born in Lumbini in southern Nepal. Parts of northern Nepal were intertwined with the culture of Tibet. The centrally located Kathmandu Valley is intertwined with the culture of Indo-Aryans, and was the seat of the prosperous Newar Confederacy known as Nepal Mandala. The Himalayan branch of the ancient Silk Road was dominated by the valley's traders. The cosmopolitan region developed distinct traditional art and architecture. By the 18th century, the Gorkha kingdom achieved the unification of Nepal. The Shah dynasty established the Kingdom of Nepal and later formed an alliance with the British Empire, under its Rana dynasty of premiers. The country was never colonized but served as a buffer state between Imperial China and British India. Parliamentary democracy was introduced in 1951 but was twice suspended by Nepalese monarchs, in 1960 and 2005. The Nepalese Civil War in the 1990s and early 2000s resulted in the establishment of a secular republic in 2008, ending the world's last Hindu monarchy. The Constitution of Nepal, adopted in 2015, affirms the country as a secular federal parliamentary republic divided into 7 provinces. Nepal was admitted to the United Nations in 1955, and friendship treaties were signed with India in 1950 and China in 1960. Nepal hosts the permanent secretariat of the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, of which it is a founding member. Nepal is also a member of the Non-Aligned Movement and the Bay of Bengal Initiative. The Nepalese armed forces are the 5th largest in South Asia, and are notable for their Gurkha history, particularly during the World Wars, and have been a significant contributor to United Nations peacekeeping operations. Etymology. Before the unification of Nepal, the Kathmandu Valley was known as Nepal. The precise origin of the term Nepal is uncertain. Nepal appears in ancient Indian literary texts dated as far back as the 4th century BC. An absolute chronology cannot be established, as even the oldest texts may contain anonymous contributions dating as late as the early modern period. Academic attempts to provide a plausible theory are hindered by the lack of a complete picture of history and insufficient understanding of linguistics or relevant Indo-European and Tibeto-Burman languages. According to Hindu mythology, Nepal derives its name from an ancient Hindu sage called Eni, referred to variously as Eni Muni or Nimi. According to Pashupati Purana, as a place protected by Eni, the country in the heart of the Himalayas came to be known as Nepal. According to Nepal Mahatmya, Nimi was charged with protection of the country by Pashupati. According to Buddhist mythology, Manjushri Bodhisattva drained a primordial lake of serpents to create the Nepal Valley and proclaimed that Adi Buddha Eni would take care of the community that would settle it. As the cherished of Eni, the valley would be called Nepal. According to Gopalarajvamsa Haveli, the genealogy of ancient Gopala dynasty compiled c. 1380s, Nepal is named after Nipa the cowherd, the founder of the Nepali scion of the Abhiras. In this account, the cow that issued milk to the spot, at which Nipa discovered the Jyotirlinga of Pashupatinath upon investigation, was also named Eni. Norwegian Indologist Christian Lassen had proposed that Nepal was a compound of Nipa and Ala, and so Nepal meant abode at the foot of the mountain. He considered Eni Muni to be a fabrication. Indologist Sylvain Levi found Lassen's theory untenable but had no theories of his own, only suggesting that either Nwera is a vulgarism of Sanskritic Nepala, or Nepala is Sanskritization of the local ethnic. His view has found some support, though it does not answer the question of etymology. It has also been proposed that Nipa is a Tibeto-Burman stem consisting of Ne means cattle and Pa means keeper, reflecting the fact that early inhabitants of the valley were Gopalas and Mahis Palas. Suniti Kumar Chatterjee believed Nepal originated from Tibeto-Burman roots, Ne, of uncertain meaning as multiple possibilities exist, and Pala or Bal, whose meaning is lost entirely. History. Ancient Nepal. By 55,000 years ago, the first modern humans had arrived on the Indian subcontinent from Africa, where they had earlier evolved. The earliest known modern human remains in South Asia date to about 30,000 years ago. The oldest discovered archaeological evidence of human settlements in Nepal dates to around the same time. After 6500 BC, evidence for the domestication of food crops and animals, construction of permanent structures, and storage of agricultural surplus appeared in Mehrgarh and other sites in what is now Balochistan. These gradually developed into the Indus Valley Civilization, the first urban culture in South Asia. Prehistoric sites of Paleolithic, Mesolithic, and Neolithic origins have been discovered in the Siwalik Hills of Dang district. The earliest inhabitants of modern Nepal and adjoining areas are believed to be people from the Indus Valley Civilization. It is possible that the Dravidian people, whose history predates the onset of the Bronze Age in the Indian subcontinent, inhabited the area before the arrival of other ethnic groups like the Tibeto-Burmans and Indo-Aryans from across the border. By 4000 BC, the Tibeto-Burmese people had reached Nepal either directly across the Himalayas from Tibet or via Myanmar and northeast India, or both. Stella Kramrish mentions a substratum of a race of pre-Dravidians and Dravidians, who were in Nepal even before the wars, who formed the majority of the ancient inhabitants of the valley of Kathmandu. By the late Vedic period, Nepal was being mentioned in various Hindu texts, such as the late Vedic Atharvaveda Pariyya and in the post-Vedic Atharvashirsha Upanishad. The Gopal Bansa was the oldest dynasty to be mentioned in various texts as the earliest rulers of the central Himalayan kingdom known by the name Nepal. The Gopalas were followed by Kiritas, who ruled for over 16 centuries by some accounts. According to the Mahabharata, the then Kirita king went to take part in the Battle of Kurukshetra. In the southeastern region, Janakpurtham was the capital of the prosperous kingdom of Videha or Mithila, that extended down to the Ganges, and home to King Janaka and his daughter, Sita. Around 600 BC, small kingdoms and confederations of clans arose in the southern regions of Nepal. From one of these, the Shakya polity, arose a prince who later renounced his status to lead an ascetic life, founded Buddhism, and came to be known as Gautama Buddha. Nepal came to be established as a land of spirituality and refuge in the intervening centuries, played an important role in transmitting Buddhism to East Asia via Tibet, and helped preserve Hindu and Buddhist manuscripts. By 250 BC, the southern regions had come under the influence of the Maurya Empire. Emperor Ashoka made a pilgrimage to Lumbini and erected a pillar at Buddha's birthplace, the inscriptions on which marked the starting point for properly recorded history of Nepal. Ashoka also visited the Kathmandu Valley and built monuments commemorating Gautama Buddha's visit there. By the 4th century AD, much of Nepal was under the influence of the Gupta Empire. In the Kathmandu Valley, the Kiratas were pushed eastward by the Lichavis, and the Lichavi dynasty came into power c. 400 AD. The Lichavis built monuments and left a series of inscriptions. Nepal's history of the period is pieced together almost entirely from them. In 641, Songtsen Gampo of the Tibetan Empire sends Narendradeva back to Lichavi with an army and subjugates Nepal. Parts of Nepal and Lichavi was later under the direct influences of the Tibetan Empire. The Lichavi dynasty went into decline in the late 8th century and was followed by a Thakuri rule. Thakuri kings ruled over the country up to the middle of the 11th century AD. Not much is known of this period that is often called the Dark Period. Medieval Nepal. In the 11th century, a powerful empire of Khas people emerged in western Nepal whose territory at its highest peak included much of western Nepal as well as parts of western Tibet and Uttarakhand of India. By the 14th century, the empire had splintered into loosely associated Baisrajas, literally 22 states as they were counted. The rich culture and language of the Khas people spread throughout Nepal and as far as Indochina in the intervening centuries. Their language, later renamed the Nepali language, became the lingua franca of Nepal as well as much of northeast India. In southeastern Nepal, Simrangarh annexed Mithila around 1100 AD, and the unified Tirhut stood as a powerful kingdom for more than 200 years, even ruling over Kathmandu for a time. After another 300 years of Muslim rule, Tirhut came under the control of the Sens of Makawanpur. In the eastern hills, a confederation of Kirat principalities ruled the area between Kathmandu and Bengal. In the Kathmandu Valley, the Mallas, who make several appearances in Nepalese history since ancient times, had established themselves in Kathmandu and Patan by the middle of the 14th century. The Mallas ruled the valley first under the suzerainty of Tirhut but established independent reign by late 14th century as Tirhut went into decline. In the late 14th century, Jayasthiti Malla introduced widespread socio-economic reforms, principal of which was the caste system. By dividing the indigenous non-Aryan Buddhist population into castes modeled after the four Varna system of Hinduism, he provided an influential model for the Sanskritization and Hindusation of the indigenous non-Hindu tribal populations in all principalities throughout Nepal. By the middle of the 15th century, Kathmandu had become a powerful empire which, according to Kirkpatrick, extended from Dagarki or Sagitsa in Tibet to Tirhut and Gaya in India. In the late 15th century, Malla princes divided their kingdom in four: Kathmandu, Patan and Bhaktapur in the valley and Bainpa to the east. The competition for prestige among these brotherly kingdoms saw the flourishing of art and architecture in central Nepal, and the building of famous Kathmandu, Patan and Bhaktapur Durbar squares. Their division and mistrust led to their fall in the late 18th century, and ultimately, the unification of Nepal into a modern state. Apart from one destructive sacking of Kathmandu Valley in the mid-14th century, Nepal remains largely untouched by the Muslim invasion of India that began in the 11th century. The Mughal period saw an influx of high-caste Hindus from India into Nepal. They soon intermingled with the Khas people, and by the 16th century, there were about 50 Rajput-ruled principalities in Nepal, including the 22 states and, to their east in west-central Nepal, 24 Chaubizi states. There emerged a view that Nepal remained the true bastion of unadulterated Hinduism at a time when Indian culture had been influenced by centuries of Mughal, followed by British rule. Gorkha, one of the Bazi states, emerged as an influential and ambitious kingdom with a reputation for justice, after it codified the first Hinduism-based laws in the Nepalese hills. Unification, expansion, and consolidation. In the mid-18th century, Prithvi Narayan Shah, a Gorkha king, set out to put together what would become present-day Nepal. he embarked on his mission by securing the neutrality of the bordering mountain kingdoms. After several bloody battles and sieges, notably the Battle of Kirtipur, he managed to conquer the Kathmandu Valley in 1769. The Gorkha control reached its height when the Kumaon and Garhwal kingdoms in the west to Sikkim in the east came under Nepalese control. A dispute with Tibet over the control of mountain passes and inner Tingri valleys of Tibet prompted the Qing Emperor of China to start the Sino-Nepali War, compelling the Nepali to retreat to their own borders in the north. The rivalry between the Kingdom of Nepal and the East India Company over the control of states bordering Nepal eventually led to the Anglo-Nepali War. At first, the British underestimated the Nepali and were soundly defeated until committing more military resources than they had anticipated needing. Thus began the reputation of Gurkhas as fierce and ruthless soldiers. The war ended in the Shugali Treaty, under which Nepal ceded recently captured lands. Factionalism inside the royal family led to a period of instability. In 1846, a plot was discovered revealing that the reigning queen had planned to overthrow Jung Bahadur Kunwar, a fast-rising military leader. This led to the Kot massacre, armed clashes between military personnel and administrators loyal to the queen led to the execution of several hundred princes and chieftains around the country. Burnar Singh Kunwar emerged victoriously and founded the Rana dynasty, and came to be known as Jung Bahadur Rana. The king was made a titular figure, and the post of prime minister was made powerful and hereditary. The Ranas were staunchly pro-British and assisted them during the Indian Rebellion of 1857 and later in both world wars. In 1860 some parts of the western Terai region were gifted to Nepal by the British as a friendly gesture because of her military help to sustain British control in India during the rebellion. In 1923, the United Kingdom and Nepal formally signed an agreement of friendship that superseded the Shugali Treaty of 1816. The Hindu practice of sati, in which a widow sacrificed herself in the funeral pyre of her husband, was banned in 1919, and slavery was officially abolished in 1924. Rana rule was marked by tyranny, debauchery, economic exploitation, and religious persecution. Contemporary history. In the late 1940s, newly emerging pro-democracy movements and political parties in Nepal were critical of the Rana autocracy. Following the success of Indian independence movement which Nepalese activists had taken part in, with India's support and cooperation of King Tribhuvan, Nepali Congress was successful in toppling the Rana regime, establishing a parliamentary democracy. After a decade of power wrangling between the king and the government, King Mahendra scrapped the democratic experiment in 1960, and a partyless panchayat system was made to govern Nepal. The political parties were banned and politicians imprisoned or exiled. The panchayat rule modernized the country, introducing reforms and developing infrastructure, but curtailed liberties and imposed heavy censorship. In 1990, the People's Movement forced King Birendra to accept constitutional reforms and to establish a multi-party democracy. In 1996, the Maoist Party started a violent bid to replace the royal parliamentary system with a People's Republic. This led to the long Nepali Civil War and more than 16,000 deaths. With the death of both the king and the crown prince in a massacre in the royal palace, King Birendra's brother Gyanendra inherited the throne in 2001 and subsequently assumed full executive powers, aiming to quash the Maoist insurgency himself. The Maoist party joined mainstream politics following the success of the peaceful democratic revolution of 2006. Nepal became a secular state, and on May 28, 2008, it was declared a federal republic, ending its time-honored status as the world's only Hindu kingdom. After a decade of instability and internal strife which saw 2 constituent assembly elections, the new constitution was promulgated on September 20, 2015, making Nepal a federal democratic republic divided into 7 provinces. Geography. Nepal is of roughly trapezoidal shape, about 800 kilometers long and 200 kilometers wide, with an area of 147,516 square kilometers. Nepal's defining geological processes began 75 million years ago when the Indian Plate, then part of the southern supercontinent Gondwana, began a northeastward drift caused by seaflowers spreading to its southwest, and later, south and southeast. Simultaneously, the vast Tethyan oceanic crust, to its northeast, began to subduct under the Eurasian Plate. These dual processes, driven by convection in the Earth's mantle, both created the Indian Ocean and caused the Indian continental crust eventually to underthrust Eurasia and to uplift the Himalayas. The rising barriers blocked the paths of rivers, creating large lakes, which only broke through as late as 100,000 years ago, creating fertile valleys in the middle hills like the Kathmandu Valley. In the western region, rivers which were too strong to be hampered, cut some of the world's deepest gorges. Immediately south of the emerging Himalayas, plate movement created a vast trough that rapidly filled with river-borne sediment and now constitutes the Indo-Gangetic Plain. Nepal lies almost completely within this collision zone, occupying the central sector of the Himalayan arc, nearly one-third of the 2,400 kilometers, with a small strip of southernmost Nepal stretching into the Indo-Gangetic Plain and 2 districts in the northwest stretching up to the Tibetan Plateau. Nepal is divided into 3 principal physiographic belts known as Himal, Pahad, Terai. Himal is the mountain region containing snow and situated in the Great Himalayan Range. It makes up the northern part of Nepal. It contains the highest elevations in the world, including 8,848.86 meters height Mount Everest on the border with China. 7 other of the world's 8,000s are in Nepal or on its border with Tibet: Lhotse, Makalu, Cho'oyu, Kangchenjunga, Dhaulagiri, Annapurna, and Manaslu. Pahad is the mountain region that does not generally contain snow. The mountains vary from 800 to 4,000 meters in altitude, with progression from subtropical climates below 1,200 meters to alpine climates above 3,600 meters. The lower Himalayan range, reaching 1,500 to 3,000 meters, is the southern limit of this region, with subtropical river valleys and hills alternating to the north of this range. Population density is high in valleys but notably less above 2,000 meters and very low above 2,500 meters, where snow occasionally falls in winter. The southern lowland plains or Terai bordering India are part of the northern rim of the Indo-Gangetic Plain. Terai is the lowland region containing some hill ranges. The plains were formed and are fed by 3 major Himalayan rivers, the Kosi, the Narayani, and the Karnali, as well as smaller rivers rising below the permanent snow line. This region has a subtropical to tropical climate. The outermost range of the foothills, called Sivalik Hills or Kuria Range, cresting at 700 to 1,000 meters, marks the limits of the Gangetic Plain. Broad, low valleys called Inner Terai Valleys lie north of these foothills in several places. The Indian Plate continues to move north relative to Asia at about 50 millimeters per year. This makes Nepal an earthquake-prone zone, and periodic earthquakes that have devastating consequences present a significant hurdle to development. Erosion of the Himalayas is a very important source of sediment, which flows to the Indian Ocean. Saptakosi, in particular, carries a huge amount of silt out of Nepal but sees extreme drop in gradient in Bihar, causing severe floods and course changes, and is, therefore, known as the Sorrow of Bihar. Severe flooding and landslides cause deaths and disease, destroy farmlands, and cripple the transport infrastructure of the country during the monsoon season each year. Nepal has 5 climatic zones, broadly corresponding to the altitudes. The tropical and subtropical zones lie below 1,200 meters, the temperate zone 1,200 to 2,400 meters, the cold zone 2,400 to 3,600 meters, the subarctic zone 3,600 to 4,400 meters, and the Arctic zone above 4,400 meters. Nepal experiences 5 seasons: summer, monsoon, autumn, winter, and spring. The Himalayas block cold winds from Central Asia in the winter and form the northern limits of the monsoon wind patterns. Politics and government. Politics. Nepal is a parliamentary republic with a multi-party system. Nepal used to be referred as the Federal Democratic Republic of Nepal until the Nepal government decided to use just Nepal as official name of the country. It has 7 national political parties recognized in the federal parliament: Communist Party of Nepal, Nepali Congress, Communist Party of Nepal, Rastriya Svatantra Party, Rastriya Prajatantra Party, People's Socialist Party and Janamat Party. Of the 2 major parties which both officially espouse democratic socialism, CPN is considered leftist while Nepali Congress is considered centrist. During most of the brief periods of democratic exercise in the 1950s and the 1990s, Nepali Congress held majority of seats in parliament. CPN was its competitor in the 1990s. After the Maoists entered the political process in 2006, they emerged as the 3rd largest party. In the aftermath of the 2017 elections, the first one according to the new constitution, NCP, formed by the merger of CPN and CPN, had become the ruling party at the federal level and in 6 out of 7 provinces. After the 2022 general election, the House of Representatives of 2nd Federal Parliament was formed as Hung Parliament, and a coalition government led by Pushpa Kamal Dahal was formed in December 2022. In the 1930s, a vibrant underground political movement arose in the capital, birthing Nepal Praja Parishad in 1936, which was dissolved 7 years later, following the execution of the 4 great martyrs. Around the same time, Nepalis involved in the Indian independence movement started organizing into political parties, leading to the birth of Nepali Congress and Communist Party of Nepal. As communism was trying to find its footing, Nepali Congress was successful in overthrowing the Rana regime in 1951 and enjoyed the overwhelming support of the electorate. In the party-less panchayat system initiated in 1962 by King Mahendra, monarchy loyalists took turns leading the government. Political leaders remained underground, exiled or in prison. A communist insurgency was crushed in its cradle in the 1970s, which led to the eventual coalescence of hitherto scattered communist factions under the United Left Front. After the joint civil resistance launched by the United Left Front and Nepali Congress overthrew the Panchayat in 1990, the front became CPN, adopted multi-party democracy, and in the brief period it was in government, introduced welfare programs that remain popular. After the Maoist party joined mainstream politics, in the aftermath of the peaceful revolution of 2006, it also adopted multi-party democracy as its official line. The transition period between 2006 and 2015 saw sustained protests from the newly formed ethnocentric nationalist movements, principal among them the Madhis movement. Government. Nepal is governed according to the Constitution of Nepal. It defines Nepal as having multi-ethnic, multilingual, multi-religious, multicultural characteristics with common aspirations of people living in diverse geographical regions, and being committed to and united by a bond of allegiance to the national independence, territorial integrity, national interest, and prosperity of Nepal. The government of Nepal has 3 branches. Executive, the form of governance is a multi-party, competitive, Federal Democratic Republican parliamentary system based on plurality. The President appoints the parliamentary party leader of the political party with the majority in the House of Representatives as Prime Minister, who forms the Council of Ministers that exercises the executive power. Legislature. The legislature of Nepal, called the Federal Parliament, consists of the House of Representatives and the National Assembly. The House of Representatives consists of 275 members elected through a mixed electoral system and has a term of 5 years. The National Assembly, consisting of 59 members elected by provincial electoral colleges, is a permanent house. A third of its members are elected every 2 years for a 6-year term. Judiciary. Nepal has a unitary 3-tier independent judiciary that comprises the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, headed by the Chief Justice, 7 high courts, 1 in each province, the highest court at the provincial level, and 77 district courts, 1 in each district. The municipal councils can convene local judicial bodies to resolve disputes and render non-binding verdicts in cases not involving actionable crime. The actions and proceedings of the local judicial bodies may be guided and countermanded by the district courts. Administrative divisions. Nepal is a federal republic comprising 7 provinces. Each province is composed of 8 to 14 districts. The districts, in turn, comprise local units known as urban and rural municipalities. There is a total of 753 local units, which includes 6 metropolitan municipalities, 11 sub-metropolitan municipalities and 276 municipalities, for a total of 293 urban municipalities, and 460 rural municipalities. Each local unit is composed of wards. There are 6,743 wards in total. The local governments enjoy executive and legislative as well as limited judicial powers in their local jurisdiction. The provinces have unicameral parliamentary Westminster system of governance. The local and provincial governments exercise some absolute powers and some powers shared with provincial or federal government. The District Coordination Committee, a committee composed of all elected officials from the local governments in the district, has a very limited role. Laws and law enforcement. The Constitution of Nepal is the supreme law of the land, and any other laws contradicting it are automatically invalid to the extent of the contradiction. The specific legal provisions are codified as Civil Code and Criminal Code, accompanied by Civil Procedure Code and Criminal Procedure Code respectively. The Supreme Court is the highest authority in the interpretation of laws, and it can direct the Parliament to amend or enact new laws as required. Nepali laws are considered generally more progressive compared to other developing countries, and in some instances, many developed ones. The death penalty has been abolished. Nepal also has made progress in LGBT rights and gender equality. It recognizes marital rape and supports abortion rights. Owing to a rise in sex-selective abortion, however, constraints have been introduced. Nepal is a signatory to the Geneva Convention, Convention's treaties on the prohibition of biological, chemical, and nuclear weapons, International Labour Organization Fundamental Conventions, Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, and the Paris Climate Accord. Some legal provisions, guided by socio-economic, cultural, and religious sensibilities, remain discriminatory. There is gender-based discrimination against foreign nationals married to Nepali citizens. Paternal lineage of a person is valued and required in legal documents. Many laws remain unenforced in practice. Nepal Police is the primary law enforcement agency. It is an independent organization under the command of the Inspector General, who is appointed by and reports to the Ministry of Home Affairs. In addition to maintaining law and order, it is responsible for the management of road traffic, which is undertaken by Nepal Traffic Police. Nepal Armed Police Force, a separate paramilitary police organization, works in cooperation with Nepal Police in routine security matters. It is intended for crowd control, counterinsurgency and anti-terrorism actions, and other internal matters where the use of force may be necessary. The Crime Investigation Department of Nepal Police specializes in criminal investigation and forensic analysis. The Commission for the Investigation of Abuse of Authority is an independent investigative agency that investigates and prosecutes cases related to corruption, bribery, and abuses of authority. At 2.16 per 100,000 in 2016, Nepal's intentional homicide rate is much lower than average. Police data indicates a steady increase in the crime rate in recent years. Nepal was ranked 76 out of 163 countries in the Global Peace Index in 2019. Foreign relations. Nepal depends on diplomacy for national defense. It maintains a policy of neutrality between its neighbors, has amicable relations with other countries in the region, and has a policy of non-alignment at the global stage. Nepal is a member of SAARC, UN, WTO, BIMSTEC, and ACD, among others. It has bilateral diplomatic relations with 167 countries and the EU, has embassies in 30 countries and 6 consulates, while 25 countries maintain embassies in Nepal, and more than 80 others maintain non-residential diplomatic missions. Nepal is one of the major contributors to the UN peacekeeping missions, having contributed more than 119,000 personnel to 42 missions since 1958. Nepali people have a reputation for honesty, loyalty, and bravery, which has led to them serving as legendary Gurkha warriors in the Indian and British armies for the last 200 years, with service in both world wars, India-Pakistan wars as well as Afghanistan and Iraq, though Nepal was not directly involved in any of those conflicts, and winning the highest military awards, including the Victoria Cross and the Paramveer Chakra. Nepal pursues a policy of balanced relations with the two giant immediate neighbors, India and China. The 1950 Treaty of Peace and Friendship with India provides for a much closer relationship. Nepal and India share an open border with free movement of people, religious, cultural and marital ties. India is Nepal's largest trading partner, which it depends upon for all of its oil and gas, and a number of essential goods. Nepalis can own property in India, while Indians are free to live and work in Nepal. Relations between India and Nepal, though very close, have faced difficulties stemming from territorial disputes, economics, and the problems inherent in big power-small power relations. Nepal established diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China on August 1, 1955, and signed the Treaty of Peace and Friendship in 1960. Relations since have been based on the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. Nepal maintains neutrality in conflicts between China and India. It remains firmly committed to the One China policy and is known to curb anti-China activities from the Tibetan refugees in Nepal. Citizens of both countries can cross the border and travel as far as 30 kilometers without a visa. China is viewed favorably in Nepal owing to the absence of any border disputes or serious interference in internal politics, coupled with its assistance in infrastructure development and aid during emergencies. Favorability has increased since China helped Nepal during the 2015 economic blockade imposed by India. Subsequently, China granted Nepal access to its ports for third-country trade, and Nepal joined China's Belt and Road Initiative. Nepal emphasizes greater cooperation in South Asia and actively pushed for the establishment of SAARC, the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, the permanent secretariat of which is hosted in Kathmandu. Nepal was one of the first countries to recognize an independent Bangladesh, and the two countries seek to enhance greater cooperation on trade and water management. Seaports in Bangladesh, being closer, are seen as viable alternatives to India's monopoly on Nepal's third-country trade. Nepal was the first South Asian country to establish diplomatic relations with Israel, and the countries enjoy a strong relationship. It recognizes the rights of the Palestinians, having voted in favor of its recognition at the UN and against the recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Countries that Nepal maintains a close relationship with include the most generous donors and development partners: the United States, the United Kingdom, Denmark, Japan, and Norway, among others. Economy. Nepal is a developing country, which ranks 165th in the world in nominal GDP per capita and 162nd in GDP per capita at PPP. Nepal's gross domestic product for 2019 was 34.186 billion. With an annual growth rate calculated at 6.5% in 2019, and expected 3% in 2021, Nepal is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Nepal has been a member of WTO since April 23, 2004. The 16.8 million worker Nepali labor force is the 37th largest in the world. The primary sector makes up 28% of GDP, the secondary sector 15%, and the tertiary sector 58%. Nepal's foreign exchange remittances of US $8.1 billion in 2018, the 19th largest in the world and constituting 28% of GDP, were contributed to its economy by millions of workers primarily in India, the Middle East and East Asia, almost all of them unskilled laborers. Major agricultural products include cereals, oilseed, potato, pulses, sugarcane, jute, tobacco, milk and water buffalo meat. Major industries include tourism, carpets, textiles, cigarettes, cement, brick, as well as small rice, jute, sugar, and oilseed mills. Nepal's international trade greatly expanded in 1951 with the establishment of democracy. Liberalization began in 1985 and picked up pace after 1990. By the fiscal year 2016, Nepal's foreign trade amounted 1.06 trillion rupees, a 23-fold increase from 45.6 billion rupees in 1990. More than 60% of Nepal's trade is with India. Major exports include ready-made garment, carpet, pulses, handicrafts, leather, medicinal herbs, and paper products, which account for 90% of the total. Major imports include various finished and semi-finished goods, raw materials, machinery and equipment, chemical fertilizers, electrical and electronic devices, petroleum products, gold, and ready-made garments. Inflation was at 4.5% in 2019. Foreign exchange reserves were at US $9.5 billion in July 2019, equivalent to 7.8 months of imports. Nepal has made significant progress in poverty reduction, bringing the population below the international poverty line from 15% in 2010 to just 9% in 2018, although vulnerability remains extremely high, with almost 32% of the population living on between US $1.90 and US $3.20 per person per day. Nepal has made improvement in sectors like nutrition, child mortality, electricity, improved flooring, and assets. Under the current trend, Nepal is expected to eradicate poverty within 20 years. The agriculture sector is particularly vulnerable as it is highly dependent on the monsoon rains, with just 28% of the arable land being irrigated, as of 2014. Agriculture employs 76% of the workforce, services 18%, and manufacturing and craft-based industry 6%. Private investment, consumption, tourism, and agriculture are the principal contributors to economic growth. The government's budget is about 13.71 billion, expenditure of infrastructure development budget, most of it contributed by foreign aid, usually fails to meet the target. The country receives foreign aid from the UK, India, Japan, the US, the EU, China, Switzerland, and Scandinavian countries. The Nepali rupee has been tied to the Indian rupee at an exchange rate of 1.6 for many years. Per capita income is 1,004. The distribution of wealth among the Nepalis is consistent with that in many developed and developing countries. The highest 10% of households control 39% of the national wealth and the lowest 10% control only 2.5%. European Union, the US, and Germany are its main export partners. They mainly buy Nepali ready-made garments. Nepal's import partners include India, the United Arab Emirates, China, Saudi Arabia, and Singapore. Besides having landlocked, rugged geography, few tangible natural resources and poor infrastructure, the ineffective post-1950 government and the long-running civil war are also factors in stunting the country's economic growth and development. Debt bondage, even involving debtors' children, has been a persistent social problem in the Western Hills and the Terai, with an estimated 234,600 people or 1% of the population considered as enslaved, by the Global Slavery Index in 2016. In 2022, Nepal limited import of non-essential goods after its foreign currency reserves dropped. COVID-19 pandemic caused a decline in tourism spending and the money sent home by Nepalis working abroad, which in turn lowered country's foreign currency reserve. Language. Nepal's diverse linguistic heritage stems from three major language groups: Indo-Aryan, Sino-Tibetan, and various indigenous language isolates. The major languages of Nepal according to the 2011 census are Nepali, Maithili, Bhojpuri, Thiru, Tamang, Nepal Beza, Bajika, and Magar, Dodali, Urdu, Awadhi, and Sunwar. Nepal is home to at least 4 indigenous sign languages. Descendant of Sanskrit, Nepali is written in Devanagari script. It is the official language and serves as lingua franca among Nepali of different ethno-linguistic groups. The regional languages Maithili, Awadhi, and Bhojpuri are spoken in the southern Terai region. Urdu is common among Nepali Muslims. Varieties of Tibetan are spoken in and north of the higher Himalaya, where standard literary Tibetan is widely understood by those with religious education. Local dialects in the Terai and hills are mostly unwritten, with efforts underway to develop systems for writing many in Devanagari or the Roman alphabet. Religion. Nepal is a secular country, as declared by the Constitution of Nepal 2012, where secularism means religious, cultural freedom, along with the protection of religion, culture handed down from time immemorial. The 2011 census reported that the religion with the largest number of followers in Nepal was Hinduism, followed by Buddhism. The remaining were Islam, Kirant, Christianity, and Prakriti or nature worship. By percentage of population, Nepal has the largest population of Hindus in the world. Nepal was officially a Hindu kingdom until recently, and Shiva was considered the guardian deity of the country. Although many government policies throughout history have disregarded or marginalized minority religions, Nepalese societies generally enjoy religious tolerance and harmony among all religions, with only isolated incidents of religiously motivated violence. Nepal's constitution does not give anyone the right to convert any person to another religion. Nepal also passed a more stringent anti-conversion law in 2017. Nepal has the second largest number of Hindus in the world after India. Culture. Traditional Nepali society is sometimes defined by social hierarchy. The Nepali caste system embodies much of the social stratification and many of the social restrictions found in South Asia. Social classes are defined by more than 100 endogamous hereditary groups, often termed as jatis, or castes. Nepal declared untouchability to be illegal in 1963 and has since enacted other anti-discriminatory laws and social welfare initiatives. At the workplace and educational institutions in urban Nepal, caste-related identification has pretty much lost its importance. Family values are important in the Nepali tradition, and multi-generational patriarchal joint families have been the norm in Nepal, though nuclear families are becoming common in urban areas. An overwhelming majority of Nepalis, with or without their consent, have their marriages arranged by their parents or other family elders. Marriage is thought to be for life, and the divorce rate is extremely low, with less than 1 in 1,000 marriages ending in divorce. Child marriages are common, especially in rural areas. Many women wed before reaching 18. Many Nepali festivals are religious in origin. The best known include Dasain, Tihar, Tej, Chhat, Maghi, Sakla, Holi, Eid ul-Fitr, Christmas, and the Nepali New Year. Symbols. The emblem of Nepal depicts the snowy Himalayas, the forested hills, and the fertile Terai, supported by a wreath of rhododendrons, with the national flag at the crest and in the foreground, a plain white map of Nepal below it, and a man's and woman's right hands joined to signify gender equality. At the bottom is the national motto, a Sanskrit quote of patriotism attributed in Nepali folklore to Lord Rama, written in Devanagari script: Mother and motherland are greater than heaven. Nepal's flag is the only national flag in the world that is not rectangular in shape. The constitution contains instructions for a geometric construction of the double pennant flag. According to its official description, the crimson in the flag stands for victory in war or courage, and is also the color of the rhododendron. The flag's blue border signifies Nepali people's desire for peace. The moon on the flag is a symbol of the peaceful and calm nature of Nepalis, while the sun represents the aggressiveness of Nepali warriors. The president is the symbol of national unity. The martyrs are the symbols of patriotism. Commanders of the Anglo-Nepalese War, Amar Singh Thapat, Bhakti Thapat, and Balbhadra Kun War are considered war heroes. A special designation of national hero has been conferred to 16 people from Nepal's history for their exceptional contributions to the prestige of Nepal. Prithvi Narayan Shah, the founder of modern Nepal, is held in high regard and considered father of the nation by many. Looting of the cultural heritage of Nepal. Cultural looting is a crisis in Nepal despite efforts to combat it. Volunteers working for the Nepal Heritage Recovery Campaign have helped recover artifacts. In 2022, Barakat Gallery's London branch relinquished 16th-century carved wooden torana, a ceremonial gateway, and the 17th-century stone statue of a kneeling devotee, both taken from sacred sites near Kathmandu. In 2023, Nepalese artifacts suspected of having been looted were found in the Art Institute of Chicago, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Dallas Museum of Art, the Rubin Museum and other museums, and turned up in auctions at Christie's, Bonhams, and other auction houses. Cuisine. Nepali cuisine consists of a wide variety of regional and traditional cuisines. Given the range of diversity in soil type, climate, culture, ethnic groups, and occupations, these cuisines vary substantially from each other, using locally available spices, herbs, vegetables, and fruit. The Columbian exchange had brought the potato, the tomato, maize, peanuts, cashew nuts, pineapples, guavas, and most notably, chili peppers, to South Asia. Each became staples of use. The cereals grown in Nepal, their choice, times, and regions of planting, correspond strongly to the timing of Nepal's monsoons, and the variations in altitude. Rice and wheat are mostly cultivated in the Terai plains and well-irrigated valleys, and maize, millet, barley, and buckwheat in the lesser fertile and drier hills.